Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jason with another edition of the Inked Up Runner. We are here with member of the Ultra Red EV team, Air Viper racing team member. He's on all sorts of different teams, so many teams it would probably take me a minute to get them all listed. But I'm with the one and only Peter Mortimer. Peter, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So a couple of quick things about Peter. He has done pretty much every type of race you could imagine. He is, he's ran on the East Coast. He's ran on the West Coast. He's actually based out of the West Coast. He's out of Arizona, which is a little different. Most of the time, I interview folks on the East side. But I'm really excited getting to talk to somebody on the West side. And what even makes Peter even more unique is he has dipped into the international level of running. He's done all sorts of stuff internationally, and so we have a lot to talk about. So I guess we'll get started. I guess, just to get started, we seeing how much running that you have done, how did it start? Did you follow the basic, 5K, 10K, marathon, ultra marathon, or did you follow a different pattern?
I started really running when I was about 30 years old. I was overweight, trying to lose some pounds, and I figured running was the best way to do that. So I would go out for a mile to 2 miles, which at that time was my max, and just kind of slugged away at it for a little bit. And then I joined the Phoenix Hash House Harriers, which is part of the Hash House Harriers' biggest running group in the world. They are a drinking club with a running problem, and that really got me passionate about running, made it fun. So I went out, ran with them for a while, and I'm like, I think I could do a half marathon. I'd done a couple of 6 to 8 mile runs, and so I signed up for a half marathon a year later and completed that, and then decided I want to try for a full. And a year later, completed my first full marathon, came close to Boston qualifying, had a couple shots going for Boston, and ended up self-sabotaging myself a few times. But I'm really finding the love in the trail running after kind of my disastrous Tucson marathon, where I almost quit running. My heart wasn't really in it, but my partner, she took me out on the trails, and she's like, "Oh, check this out," and I was hooked.
So was she the one that introduced you to the trail running kind of scene, so to speak, you would say?
Yeah. She got me to sign up for Air Viper race, and it was kind of a disaster race for me, but I really had a great time with everybody, and just the community. I didn't like large crowds at the end of the marathons. Every time I finished one, the first thing I wanted to do was get out of there. I couldn't hang out, it just wasn't me. And the community in the trail running scene is much different. And it's small. You meet someone at a trail race, and then you'll see them again at another trail race. You don't see that very often happen in like marathons. I mean, there's just too many people.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a different dynamic when you look at trail running and the community part of it, right? I mean, because it's not like you're racing people, because let's face it, you are racing people. You want to win in a trail race, but
sure,
there's almost a level of like kinship to a certain degree, right? It's just like,
absolutely.
It's just like when I was interviewing Phil Young, the guy who won Tunnel Hill and beat Zach Bitter in like the last, it was like less than a mile, and he passed him and beat him to win Tunnel Hill, right? It was interesting listening to him talk about, like, how, you know, he ran with Taggart Van Etten for a while, you know, and those guys kind of partied up. And then, you know, it was interesting listening to how, you know, they were together and they were kind of pushing each other and at the same time talking and enjoying each other's company. I don't think I've ever watched a road marathon where the top two guys were like laughing and cutting up with each other and like, you know, like having a good time. You just don't see that, right?
Right. No, it doesn't happen. And, you know, races that we're doing, the lengths of them, you'll see someone hang with them for a bit, and then you may not see him for another 4 or 5 hours, and then you'll run into him again. You know, everyone has their good and bad moments in a race. But yeah, you never go in a race, say, I'm going to run this whole thing with somebody, but at least get to have those conversations. I feel like all the marathons and halves I did, I've never once sat and just hung back and just chatted with people along the way. It was just, plus I just couldn't wait to get them over with, to be honest.
So, you know, looking, you know, so your evolution of like, you know, because I didn't go through all the great things that you've accomplished, but, you know, I mean, you know, Peter here has, you know, he's pretty doggone good. He's you know, he plays second at BFC. He plays second at GDR. He just recently won the Hurt 100. So he's no slouch. So he, you know, looking at your pedigree of running and your accomplishments are pretty stout. And so did you build up to having that level of success or did it come relatively quick for you over a short period of time? Or when did you realize, hey, I'm pretty good at this?
When I won the Hurt 100. I mean,
that was a few months ago, by the way, guys.
When I mean, I've had lots of success and I'm never satisfied. I mean, I just, you know, even races I finished first and I'm like, oh, you know, I could do better. I could be better. And my girlfriend thinks I'm nuts. You know, I just, it's been a hard road for me just mentally to kind of grasp that. I mean, I worked my ass off to get where I am. And I, you know, maybe I have some genetics there, but when I started out, I mean, I was overweight and I didn't have any, you know, running pedigree. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just kind of figured it out. And I'm stubborn enough to where I like to figure things out the hard way. And a lot of that is through self-experience. And so, you know, I've crashed out races, sure, and I've had, you know, horrible experiences, but I've always learned from them. And I've just tried to take that and run, pardon the pun. But I think, you know, each year that's gone by, I've tried to sign up for something that's harder, that's more difficult, that's going to push me. And I'm normally a one and done guy for most races, except for some of the local stuff. So I'm going to do as well as I can on this race. I'm going to finish, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And that's kind of what I've stuck by. I still think there's lots of room for me to grow as I figure this out. And at least until my knees give out, and then maybe I'll have to go into biking or something. I don't know.
It's funny because everybody says, you know, if you're a runner, you know, don't your knees hurt or your knees are going to give out or something to that nature. It's always like the go-to for people who don't want to run. And talking to a runner, that's like the first thing they say. And what's funny is I've been running now since, I don't know, 2013 or 2014, and I don't think I've ever had any knee issues ever in my life. All my issues have been in other places. It's never been a knee issue for me, which is, and I'm sure some people have knee issues, but like it's never a thing. So I guess being local, you're around the Aravaipa scene, right? There's a lot of races and whatnot. Was Javelina your first 100 miler?
It was, yeah. And go ahead.
And that's a pretty crazy atmosphere, right?
Yeah, the year I did it, it was, I mean, it'd been around for a while, but it was still on the old kind of Pemberton only loop. And then they had like a half loop at the end. So it was like 6.5 Pemberton loops. And it was not what it is today, not at that level for sure. As far as like the amount of people and like how much the aid station, like Jackass Junction, was big, but it wasn't like what it is now. But yeah, it was in my backyard. So I really had no business doing that race at the time. I mean, I ran my first 50 miler a month before and just thought like, oh, I did a 50, I could do 100s. And I just jumped in and I mean, it wasn't pretty, but I got it done.
You got it done. I mean, and that's and you know, and that's and from what I hear for folks out west, it's a pretty good first 100 miler. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I mean, as far as the elevation, it's where, what, 2,000 feet. It's not a big deal. And then there's not a ton of elevation per loop. You've got pretty stacked aid stations. The thing you have working against you is the heat, which even for Arizona is not that hot at that time of year, but hot enough to take most runners down. And I've done it a couple times, and it's more of a kind of a fun race for me now. You just go out and just kind of party it up and dress up. And I volunteer a lot at that race. If I'm not running, then I'm probably there, like, cooking up on the barbecue. So,
So, and I think what's cool about what you do is you run in a lot of different environments. And you run out west, and then you've done some stuff out east here, where it's a different dynamic weather wise. There's a whole lot more humidity and whatnot. How when you go and move to different, I guess, geographic areas to run races, how do you prepare yourself for like the weather? Like, especially like, you've ran the Georgia Death Race. That's in, that's that's in the South, and you've been in here in Tennessee where you've ran Barkley Fall Classic, and that race can be kind of humid and messy and just a tough race compared to being out west and where you got more of a dry, arid type of environment. How do you prepare yourself? Because, and the reason why I ask that is because I always ask that for runners going from east to west, right? I just interviewed a guy locally who ran the Leadville 100, and I asked him, what he did to get prepared for that climate out there, the elevation change. And, I rarely get to ask somebody from the West Coast coming over to the East Coast. Do you feel like there's any sort of different preparation to deal with our humidity that we carry here?
Yeah. So, being from Arizona, like, I'm pretty like climatized to the heat, so to speak. But it is, dry heat is different. I know people hate hearing that, but it's the difference of like opening like a sauna versus your oven at home. You feel it hits you for a second, and then it's like, oh, it's almost kind of soothing until it gets to about 110, and then it's just bakes your skin. But yeah, as far as the humidity goes, I mean, I try and layer up and just sweat like crazy. I mean, I'm a big guy, 6'3", so I sweat a lot anyway. For like the Hurt, for example, where it's pretty humid, I spent a lot of my time just with snow-capped mountains right now. I'm just going up there with multiple layers and just sweating out like as much as I can. And it just, like, humidity is miserable. I mean, I've run in Hong Kong and the East Coast. It's just, it's the worst experience for me running. It sucks. I hate going outside and then immediately just like sweating bullets. It's just, but it's a part of the deal. It's just, that's what makes that race that much harder. So I try and just do the sufferfest at home best I can.
And that makes sense. I would have known. I would, and after hearing you say that, that makes sense. You want to layer up and just sweat as much as possible, because you're right. Like here in Tennessee, you walk outside in the summertime, and the heat index is through the roof, and the humidity is like just terrible. And like, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's actually a race that runs across the state of Tennessee, like in the heat of the summer, that Last puts on, called the Last Annual of All State.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you know, I do not. First off, I would never run on the Tennessee roads, period, for that long, because people drive like crazy folks. And
Yeah.
two, dealing in the heat of the summer um, is just nuts. And like, you had Bob Hearn last year, the West Coast guy, who did it in right at a little bit over 4 days, and broke like the supported record and the unsupported record, which is just like craziness. So like, I'd always wondered, you know, for folks from the coming from the West to the East, you know, like how they prepare for a race. And that, I mean, for a race out here, and that makes a ton of sense. It's like sweating as much as possible. So you came out here, and you got to run, you know, BFC. One thing that you did get to do, you got to run Barkley. So, you know, talk about your experience running Barkley.
It was it's a painful story to share. So yeah, my first Barkley experience was not great. I spent a few years you know, trying to work my way into the system. I went out to the BFC to try and win, came close. But yeah, I got the second place, but I ended up getting into Barkley the old fashioned way. And the first year I was selected was COVID, which canceled. So then it knocked me over another year, which was kind of in my benefit because I broke my hand while I was training. And it probably wouldn't have been great going out on a 7-week-old fracture with poles.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I didn't care. I was just so determined to go at that point, stubborn. But yeah, so my first experience, I got there the day before, did the rigmarole, going through tracing the map, and yeah, the morning of, I didn't hear the conch because I was in my van sleeping, and it was raining so hard that no one heard anything. I woke to someone banging on my window, and got up. I was already dressed, ready to go, ran, got my watch from Laz, and went to throw some stuff back in my van. And I thought I had somewhere like I mean, you should have an hour after the conch blows. But what I didn't realize is the conch had already blown, and I had like just a few minutes. So I got to my van, and they're already gathering at the gate. I'm like, well, holy crap. And so I just kind of snagged my pack and my packet, which has everything, including my race bib, although my race bib slipped out and landed in between my seat and my center console, and started the race. And as we're going up, you know, it's just the excitement. It's, I don't know, I can't remember, it was 1 or 2 in the morning, rain's coming down, going straight uphill, and just trying to, you know, the adrenaline's kicking in, and I'm going over everything in my head. I'm like, just stay cool, stay with the front. And then I started thinking about the pages, and I couldn't remember my bid number. I was sure it was 15, but I wasn't 100%. And I started having a panic attack. And I was behind Jeff Garmeyer, and I'm cussing and swearing, dropping F-bombs. I'm like, fuck, like literally just running uphill in the rain, digging through my packet, you know, trying to like jump over obstacles and like little rivers. I'm literally going through my packet, trying to read, and then I'm asking him like, do you have a list of the bib numbers? And he's like freaking out because I'm having just like a meltdown. And finally I'm like, you know, I have to know what it is. And it must have like fallen out in the van. I got to go back. So about 1.5 miles up, I turn around and go run all the way back to camp, go open the door and dig around, and I find it slips in between the seat. And sure enough, 15. And I'm just like, you know, fuck my life. So I run back uphill, and I'm just hammering, trying to catch up to him, because I know if I can at least see a light, like have somebody to follow, then I'm gonna, because that's the key to that race, is you really have to know someone that knows the route. Otherwise, everything looks the same. And about a mile up, the fog rolled in. I did manage to catch the last guy, and we hung together for a little bit trying to route find. And I went off the side of the bench of this mountain, and I ended up going in the right direction, but just off the wrong side, and ended up outside the park. Like I just kept going and going, and you're following instructions on paper of what to look for, but everything looks the same. And when you can't see more than 20 feet in front of you, or even if you see a mountain, it doesn't mean it's the mountain that you're supposed to go up, because there's a mountain right behind that one. So I was pretty hosed. I ended up some church, Gobi Church, I think it was called, and figured I was lost. And so I ended up running all the way back and ended up at the front of the park. And I got back to camp, and I was actually the first to tap out, and it was pretty embarrassing and pretty heart-wrenching. And it still eats away at me, obviously, because I trained so hard to get in that race. It's spent years of just vertical climb and pushing myself, and then you go and you're trying to get tidbits of information, trying to figure it out. And I mean, I'm dedicated, and my first go around just ended so dramatically. So it just, I don't know, but Laz says they'll be talking about that story for years around campfires. So I got a good laugh out of me. And
well, and I think, that's it's just an incredibly harsh environment in general. And I think, it's just, it's what's interesting is that there's always really crappy weather, and
sure.
and and I think, if the weather is bad, most of the time there's not a finisher. And
I agree. Yeah.
And I think there's no, and I guess it's not fair to say this because anything can be done, right? But let me phrase it like this. In my experience living locally and this following it for all the years that I followed it almost the conditions have to be spot on perfect for there to be a finisher, just because it's just like you said, it's almost like a labyrinth out there, so to speak. Everything kind of looks the same, and even guys who have ran it year after year after year still go out there. And you would think, right, after somebody who's ran it 4 or 5 years, you would think, well, surely they would have a good grasp of the course and would be able to finish it, right? But that's not the case. I mean, because you have Jamil's ran it a few times. John Kelly, he's finished it, but he's also not finished it. I think he tapped
Sure.
out the last time that he ran it. And so it just goes to show you that you can be a finisher and still fail at that race.
Yeah. And it's a race that's not getting any easier. I mean, it's always going to get harder. And at some level, one day it will be unattainable. I really believe that. I know finishers that I talked to them about it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's a much different race than when I did it. And I don't know if I could finish it now,
Yeah.
Which for guys that haven't finished it, they keep going back. And every time someone does come in and finish it, they got to be thinking, oh geez, like I just started figuring this thing out, and now it's changing again. So I'm hoping I'll get another chance again. I'm on the waiting list for this year, but I'm deep enough in that I probably won't get selected. Most likely won't get selected. So it's not really on my radar so much. But I am determined to go back. But I'll hold my spot for next year and keep moving up that list.
And I think it's around the same time as GDR, if I remember correctly. I think in years past, I think it's the same week. It's either the same weekend or the weekend before or after that the Georgia Death Race is. And so I always correlate the two together because I'm usually following both of them at the same time, kind of simultaneously. So you did Barkley, and you obviously want more. Did you do a lot of like did you do the orienteering classes and all that kind of stuff, or was that something you kind of did self-taught yourself, or how did you
So
attack that?
yeah, I've done some of the, I go out every once in a while and do them. I want to do more this year, since I have my schedule's a little bit different. But yeah, I've gone out with friends and done it. I actually did a 200-mile orienteering race across Wales. That really helped as well. When you're running that far, it kind of you got to figure it out sooner or later. But yeah, I do kind of enjoy those like open fell style running, running across open face mountains. It's, not everything has to have a path. That's what's great, and you can find some of the coolest stuff that way. It's there's We found a cave recently in Sedona, off this off beaten path, which I'm sure some of the locals know about, but you kind of go this crazy roundabout way finding something, and you're like, no one ever comes up here. I mean, there's no trail within a mile of here, and that most people probably don't even know about. And it's just finding, ever since I was a kid. I mean, I used to skip school and go off into the mountains when I lived in Italy, and we would spend all day running around. And I wasn't into running or anything. I was just into exploring and finding all these cool places. And I guess I'm still doing that today.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine being able to explore in Italy. I mean, that sounds amazing. So, you talked a little bit about your international stuff. You said you got to run in Hong Kong. The one that the orienteering class. Did you say that one was across? Was that one across Great Britain?
Dragon's Back race. Yeah, that was across the country of Wales.
Wales.
So you start in a castle on the north end of Wales, and over 5 days, you run to the south end of Wales. And now I think it's 6 days. They may have changed it a little bit, but yeah, that was my first stage race, actually.
Yeah, those are cool. The stage race thing is really, really cool. I know that like I enjoy like following around those races because it's so cool with those stage races, how people jockey for position, and people move between different depending on the environment and the day and everything. You can move up and down. It's definitely a cool dynamic. And you also got to run at UTMB, which is pretty cool too, because a lot of folks can't say that they've got to do UTMB. So I mean, you've done some really unique things. And so the UTMB experience for you, was it everything you thought it would be? Did it live up to the expectation of, like, because it's almost like over there they treat you like we treat like Super Bowl, like athletes like Michael Jordan, and it shows my age when I say Michael Jordan, but like
Yeah, yeah.
the superstars over there. It's like there's streets and people everywhere. I mean, did the UTMB live up to what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it did. When I first started getting into trail running, I picked up I think it was Ultra Running magazine, and it had a picture of Francois Dehane, and he was on a UTMB course, and I was just like, that's what I want to do. And a couple of years later, I got to do that, and it was really special. I spent years qualifying. I didn't get in the first year on the lottery, get in on the second year. And then when we did go, I think there was like 8 of us that we just made it a trip, and spent 2 weeks in Europe. And I just kind of put that race right in the middle of it. And, so they had the crew out there, they got to experience everything as well. And yeah, standing on that starting line, I mean, there's no other, feeling like it. It is like the Super Bowl of running, and you go out there and everyone goes out super crazy hard down the streets, and throughout the entire race there's people just lining the mountain, the single track trails, and they come out of their homes, and it's a festival. I mean, there's multiple races going on, and they're all out there supporting you. And it's just, that's one of those few races that I would probably do again. I mean, it's magical. I can't really say much more than that.
I mean, I couldn't imagine being in those mountains and seeing that too. And it seems like too with the international style races, it's just a different level of environment, you know, from the standpoint of the crowd and the people. You know, in the aid station, I know we have a local guy here who's you know ran out there before, and he was talking about how even the aid station food is different. You know, the cheeses and all the different stuff that's different than what we, you know,
Mhm.
like you know over here you run you know you run a las race, you get a beef stick, you know, and
Yeah.
you know like some Kroger Coke or something. But this is different. And then a lot of those races over there too, you're required to carry certain supplies, right? I mean, you have to carry certain supplies, and they check you in and see like if you got the proper gear before you can move to the next level, because I guess the environment can be, I guess, that unpredictable.
Yeah, a lot of the races, especially in the World Series, they require that. Especially you're going in mountains like that. I mean, when I did it, it started raining at the beginning. You know, thunderstorms, and then I had a blizzard I had to go through. And you know, and then it was sunny, and I mean, it's just kind of all over the map. And they do check your bags, and they look for random items. Um, and then if you don't have those, you get disqualified. But it's more of a safety thing, you know. And really, I mean, that's how I treat all my runs now. Initially, when I first started running, especially the mountain races, I wasn't taking half the stuff up there, and now I just wouldn't even think leaving without it, because I've been caught enough times in just, you know, absolutely horrible weather. And when you do the types of races I do, or the types of trails that I do, it's not a question of if, it's when.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like here, you know, we don't have the mountains like that you have out west, in height wise, but you know, like in the Smoky Mountains, for example, um, you know, the weather there can turn on a dime,
Mhm.
really quick. Like I was up there with some friends. They were attempting to do Scar, and you know, the morning time it started out, it was cool, but you know they weren't really calling for any crazy weather. And then by the time we got to the highest point, which is Klingman's Dome, which is the highest point, you know, of the Smoky Mountains, and it was sleeting and snowing, was not even in the forecast originally. And the weather, and me and a friend, about you know an hour prior to, was on that same mountain, and the sun was out. And so it's just crazy how you're up there 1 minute, and it's just like that mountain weather just drops on you. And like you said, you don't want to be out there stuck in a situation where you're like, you know, where you could literally lose your life if you don't have the proper supplies. So
Yep.
I just found that interesting, because I watch a lot of international. I watch a lot of Jeff Peltier stuff, and you know he's runs in Africa, and they have to have supplies. And he ran a race in Canada where they was checking his blood pressure at one of the aid stations, and I was like, wow, that's crazy, because I guess they was checking to make sure his levels were good before they were going to let him go on. I never even heard that before. Um,
Yep.
you know, so
Yeah, that's especially in the multi-day stuff. I've had them do that a couple times, and I never really even think about it in the moment. It's just someone's coming over to take my blood pressure, you know, and I'm like, just I work in a hospital environment, so I think it just doesn't even phase me. You know, I'm just always getting checked out for something there. But yeah, no, it's all a safety deal, and like I said, I think more people should do those types of races. It's great too to train with all that stuff. I mean, you get used to having this heavy load on your back, and then you go and do some easy, you know, 50K, and then you're just carrying a bottle, and you're like, oh man, I got some extra pep in my step.
right, you're a little bit lighter. You can get moving along. So
Yeah.
so I guess, you know, at what point did you decide you wanted to really jump in and do, like you wanted to jump into the 200-mile game and attack that? Because you've done Tahoe, you've done Bigfoot, you've done Cocodona. When Tahoe was your first one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and so what was, what I guess what led to the evolution into that?
So yeah, Tahoe, I think I did in 2016. The When I did that one, it was just 200s were still kind of newer, I guess you could say. I just thought, I was like, well, there's a 200-mile race, and I didn't know those existed. And I've already done hundreds. I'm like, could I do 200 miles? I just wanted to see again if I could do it. I know that there's a couple of races out there you could do like 120 and whatnot. I'm like, if I could do a 200-mile race and finish it, that would be a huge, notch in the belt for me. And I did it in 84 hours at Tahoe, which it's not a bad time. I did it with some friends, and they were there like to pace me, and we. It's funny. A couple of those friends weren't even doing ultras, and now they're doing 100 miles because after they came and paced me on that race, they were like, "This is amazing," and they just got hooked. So, but yeah, after I did it once, I was like, this is my type of race. I mean, running for days on end, and I mean, I'm pretty fast runner, but I really think my strength comes from like the multi-day stuff. I felt like that was kind of my niche.
So, so in saying that, like, you say you're good at the multi-day stuff. So are you one of those folks that don't really need a lot of sleep? Like, can you go without a lot of sleep and be like, and function well?
I can, yeah. I think part of it comes through, growing up, when I should say, when I got out of the military, and I was, I had kids at a young age, and I had started a job in this career that I'm doing now, but at the time I couldn't afford to give up my other job. So I was working, two jobs at a time, and then sleeping like the next day. I would literally go to work, and then in the evening I would work all night through the next morning, and then go back to my next job and work all day, and then come home and sleep. And I did that, multiple times a week, just to, like, have money and, get by and stuff. And I mean, kids are expensive. So, and then over time, I mean, I like sleep, but it's never been like a huge priority for me because I always feel like I'm missing out on something. I'm an early riser. If the sun's up, then, if I'm not up by the sun's up, something's wrong. But as I've done these races, I've kind of, used that, and I've gotten better at it actually with my sleep. I think in Tahoe, I slept 3.5 hours. Bigfoot, a year later, I slept 2.5 hours. And then Cocodona, I slept an hour and 40 minutes with the extra 50 miles. So I think I can even narrow that down a little bit more.
That's nuts, man. So, and what's nuts is, just how fast you got, it's just like, from Tahoe to Bigfoot, you picked up like an entire day on your time, which is just like nuts. And coming in second at Bigfoot is pretty daggum amazing. I mean, did that, I guess in a 200-mile race, and I'm not real familiar with the setup of them. Are the aid stations further away to where you have to carry more stuff, or are they pretty close together like a normal race?
So yeah, it depends. Candace's races, a lot of times they're about 18 to 20 miles apart. I mean, you kind of have to be self-sufficient for the most part, but that's, even if you're going fast, that could be like 8 to 10 hours, you're out there, especially on a place like Bigfoot, where it's really remote. So yeah, it's the Cocodona, they have aid stations a little closer together in sections. But the one thing where you talk about time and the difference from Tahoe to Bigfoot is, that's actually one of the things I'm pretty proud of is, after finishing Tahoe, I knew I wanted to do Bigfoot. That was kind of the next one in the step. And I went back, I trained all year, but the defining thing that changed for me that year was my nutrition. I changed from like a carb athlete to a low carb athlete, fat adapted. And I started that probably I'd say 2 to 3 months before Bigfoot. And I just started seeing just huge differences. I could just go further, go longer. And I was still I was still new, I was still figuring it out. I mean, I've been tailoring it for I've been doing this for 5 years now. But that was really the defining factor. Being able to just burn fat for long periods of time. And it's made me a better runner. And I've never looked back. And I know it's not for everybody. I think everybody's, there's no right or wrong way of running. But for me, that was huge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, anybody that can cut off a full day, I mean, 24 hours is nuts, in between the time frame. And I think what's even more telling is the fact that you made that big of a improvement. Well, not really, I won't say improvement, but that big, you felt that much different in such a short turnaround time. In 3 months, that's fairly quick. And I mean, for somebody who, obviously, you're in the medical field, you're very versed in physiology, of your body and the makeup and everything. I mean, 3 months is fairly quick to see that kind of a turnaround, and you saw it in 3 months. And on top of that, you came in second place, and that's just nuts. And now, I guess, had you been talking to other people who had been using that system, or did you just think, you know what, I want to give this a shot and see what it does?
No, so Nick Curry, he's on the Airvipa team, brother of Jamel and American record holder now.
Yep.
He, yeah, he's a hell of an athlete. I look up to him quite a lot. And when I started in this going to these races, again, he comes from more of a running background. He's a smart guy. He does his research. And I was at a race, I think it was Zane Grey, it was that year. And he came by me at like mile 30 and just looked incredible. And I was like, what is this guy doing that I'm not doing right? And I got talking to him about it, and he put me in touch with Peter Defty. I was the manager of Vespa, this product it's a catalyst that kind of ignites your fat metabolism. And the whole thing seemed kind of hoodoo, like, to me. I was just like, I don't know. And I was researching about it, but like most people would just kind of poo-poo it or the data. And I'm like, well, if it works, I want to see if it works. And the big thing for me was I was having issues like GI distress on races, throwing up, and you eat so many shot blocks or goos or whatever. It's like that only gets you so far. And I got really tired of that. And I've really had, except the only time I've really had problems with my stomach since then is when it's been heat related, which then you can't keep anything down anyway. So I really haven't had that issue ever again. And the benefits that I started seeing from it, I mean, and just to give you like an example, I saw the benefits myself during the running, and like, looking on Strava, and like, well, I'm getting faster on these loops and I'm getting stronger, and in the race results. But this past weekend, we actually were gathering some pilot data down in Phoenix, Arizona, with it was Nick Curry, his wife Lauren Curry. You've got Anthony Kunkel, Jeff Browning, all these low carb, fat adapted athletes. Lauren is not, though; she's more of a carb dependent. We were just kind of trying to gather some data, so we went on the treadmill, and they put the VO2 mask on, and we wanted to see the crossover point from burning fat to burning carbs, so as your primary fuel source. And we did one day without Vespa, and it was fasted, and then the next day was with Vespa fasted. And you would think, well, day 2 is going to be worse because you're tired legs, but we want to see how the Vespa product, changed our performance. And I'd never seen my data before, other than just feel, and it was startling to me, seeing when I was actually burning, like the first, I don't know how many minutes I was on that treadmill. And but that was another thing. We started at a 10-minute pace, and they ramp it up every 4 miles, or 4 minutes, sorry. They ramp it up by a half mile an hour faster until you get to 9 miles an hour. And then they just start raising the incline. until you tap out. And those first like 30 minutes, I mean, I wasn't even burning carbs. I was just burning just sheer fat. And it wasn't until the intensity started going up that I started to see a trickle of carbs coming into my system. But again, still fat as the primary fuel source. And what people don't understand is when we say this, it's like, we're not, crapping on carbs or anything. You need them. We use them strategically. I mean, but for an average, runner, for example, you have about 1,200 to 1,500 of glucose calories, and you have about 50 to 60,000 fat calories. Well, which do you want to tap into? The one you got to replace every hour on the hour, or do you want to go on, if you can run in your fat stores, you're going to be much more efficient. So seeing that crossover point, the first day I didn't even cross over. Wow. Even when I tapped out. And to me, that was startling data, because I also run on my heart rate, because your zone 2 is your fat burning state. That's where you want to be at. And using the cheat math, I would call it, it's normally zone 2, you just take 180 minus your age, which in this case I'm 40, so I'm at 140, and then you kind of plus or minus 10 from there, and that's your zone that you really want to run in for supreme fat burning. But I was burning fat well into 170. And if I ever got into like my 160s, I would start backing it off, which just tells me that, I can push myself harder and longer, now that I can see the data in front of me. And the numbers don't lie. I mean, it is what it is. We have a lot more to go on that, but it's I think it should open the eyes for a lot of people that are on the fence about it. I think it's really really worth looking into.
Absolutely. And that's something that I would not, you would not think that on the front end, because, people, carb, right? It's like the first thing I heard when I started running, the night I was like getting ready to run my first half marathon, right? And I having all these people texting me, good luck. Make sure you get that spaghetti dinner in, and mm-hmm. It's like, it's all about eating those, carbing it up as much as you can. And hearing, this data that you have, that's really telling. And I think, it was funny when we were talking about, when I asked you, when did you realize that you're pretty good at this? You said when you won the Hurt 100, which was, just here recently. But when, you look at your results and you have steadily gotten, like you can see like how you're improving. And I think, at the rate it's going, I mean, it seems like you're just getting it dialed in even more and more and more. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important your intake is of what you're
Absolutely.
putting in.
I mean, I started off, eating, like crap, eating everything at the aid station. I mean, to me, ultras at the beginning was all about the food. You go in and just like, all the candy and all this, whatever. I'm like, who cares? I'm running 100 miles. And that's slowly, as I've gotten better and like got more competitive with myself, I'm like, this is something's got to change. And the nutritional side of it, I'm not, I do a low carb / ketogenic diet, but I don't shy away from ice cream and all the good like pleasures of life either. I'm just more strict about it, and if I'm in a busier or a more hectic part of my training block, I'm going to take in more of those types of calories than I would if I'm not. I use keto as a tool before a race. So I go into a fasted state. So my fat burning is just like, on point. But that type of running, which I do, all the time, has been very beneficial because I can go out for hours at a time. I don't consume calories generally the first 3 to 4 hours in an event. I'm just going out and just, let my body settle in, and then I start introducing the carbs little by little as a trickle.
I got you. That makes sense. And so I guess, so you went with, so you knew somebody who kind of introduced you to it. For like somebody who is like watching this, or is, if you wanted to learn more about this, would you just go in and Google high fat, low carb diet, and it would kind of give you kind of a blueprint of kind of what something like this would look like?
Yeah, so the Vespa OFM website is really good for that. I mean, they have their product, but they also have the OFM side, the optimized fat metabolism side, which is more of like your training your body to do this. You don't need Vespa to do this. The Vespa helps, but you really have to train your body to burn the fat. Just like, we're born into this world at this point is sugar dependent. I mean, sugar is in everything. And I mean, you've got, diabetics who are sitting on the couch and they're just burning carbs by doing nothing. It's like we should be burning fat as our primary fuel source. And all runners burn fat, like when you go out, but it's just changing it to your primary fuel source. So you're not tapping into those carbs. So that's where you get the funk, right? So like your sugar level gets low, and then you got to take something in, and your sugar level gets low. You can't do that when you've got like 60,000 calories on board. It just doesn't happen. All you have to do is kind of maintain a little sugar trickle just to kind of keep you topped off. And that's where the Vespa comes in. It helps with that. It's got like 5 grams of carbs and 18 calories, but man, it'll give you like a rush. It's just, without that crash, it's great.
Yeah. And that's, and I've heard that too, from other runners, and most of those runners are pretty successful runners. I know Greg Armstrong, who was, but yeah, I mean, Greg Armstrong, who was on the 24-hour team, he talked about how you introduce sugar in you don't really, you don't really fast from sugar, but you don't really intake a lot of sugar, and then you wait, and then once you get into your race or your run, then you can introduce sugar into the race at a later stage, and it gives you that jolt that you talked about, right?
Yep.
And so who were some of the people you were talking about who do that? I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So Zach Bitter, world record holder. Jeff Browning, he's got second most 100-mile wins. Nick Curry, another American record. I mean, all these guys that are doing it, and like, there's plenty of haters out there. They're just like, oh, it's a fad, or this doesn't work. And I'm like, it's obviously working for them.
Right.
They're doing these absolutely amazing things. And, I'm not doing like world record stuff, but I don't know. I feel like it works pretty well for me. So I think it's, I'm very open-minded about things. I like figuring stuff out the hard way. If it doesn't work for me, then, whatever, but at least you learn something from it. I think it's worth checking out for, if you're on the fence or have a question about it. So, and don't ever feel like, you can always message me. Like, people message me about this stuff all the time. And it's not rocket science, but it does take some dedication at the beginning, for sure.
Was there a huge, did you, I don't want to say withdrawal, because it has such a negative connotation to it, but did you suffer any sort of like side effects converting over to that? Did your body kind of have like yearnings, or did you kind of have that pulling that of how you ate previously?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, initially, I always thought like, bread has been around since the dawn of time. How can it be bad for you? Well, it's not exactly the same bread we're eating, 100 years ago. But the first thing you really have to do is kind of a keto reset, and learn how your body adapts to that. I mean, I didn't run for, I think it was like 2 weeks. I just dialed in the nutritional side. I learned what it was like. It felt, going through the keto flu and being lethargic. And then I started gradually introducing the running, but small amounts. And as I ramped up, initially it was like, oh, this is so hard. Like, I'm just so depleted. But then you learn, you keep running in a heart rate, and then you suddenly just get past it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have all this energy. And then, after you've been doing it for a while, again, it's not, the keto reset thing is just like a tool to get you on board with the program. After that, I eat low carb most of the time, but again, you don't have to shy away from things. And the beauty of it is you can just train your body to jump into keto, where most people will take them a couple of weeks. It takes me a couple of days. and it immediately just gets the body going, and my body's so accustomed to it now, and you just turn on the furnace, so to speak. And I really think, it's to get past the cravings initially. Sure, it's hard. You got to give up like any diet, but you're not giving them up forever. You're just teasing your body, so to speak.
And making that conversion, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you see a huge influx in your weight when you did all that?
Oh, I dropped so much weight. I mean, I was, I think, at the high 180s, 190s by the time when I did Bigfoot, I dropped down to like 165.
Whoa.
Which I was pretty hard in the keto at that time. And again, I've learned to just kind of dial that back a little bit. I don't, spend as much time in nutritional ketosis, and it's not a good idea for runners. It really isn't. It just, you kind of have to use it as a tool and cycle it. And I now, like I said, I just kind of do it. I feel if the holidays roll around, I'm not afraid to like go and partake in that sort of stuff. And, I'm still going out there running, and who cares? And then like at the end of the holidays, just like, boom, do a little reset. And then, I'm straight back in it. But it gets easier every time you do that. So you keep, everything like sugary and wonderful in life should be a treat. We've become so accustomed to having everything all the time. I mean, when you can just get anything delivered on your doorstep, you don't have to work for anything anymore. That's the biggest problem. Like, people just want like a magic pill to solve everything for them. You still have to be able to go out and work. It's our kind of hunter-gatherer instinct, so to speak.
Sure. And I think you're right. I think we're all a product of convenience, right? I mean, you want that
Sure.
Reese cup, you just go to the supermarket and grab you that Reese cup, right? Or get you that Kit Kat, or or grab you that, that soda, or whatever it is that you want. You can get it like that, and you just have to have that self-control. And then at the end of the day, there's the health benefits for it as well, right? Because, not to knock a Reese cup or a Kit Kat, but I mean, they're not exactly the most healthiest thing in the world. And, if you're limiting the amount of that stuff you're putting in your body, you're going to overall have a more positive health effect in the long run for the longevity of your health. I would imagine. Sounds like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for honestly, one of the biggest takeaways for me too, especially on the running side of that, is I've been in those races where it's, really humid, really hot. And when you can't keep anything down, but you're fat adapted, you can just keep going. You can keep going on the electrolytes. I mean, Michael McKnight has proven that. I mean, he's another example. I love how he just takes it outside, he takes things out of the box, and people critique him for it. He recently did a 100-mile without calories, just to see if he could do it. Immediately started getting people, hating on him, saying, he had an eating disorder or whatnot, and this is a bad experience. But he's doing it for his own personal data, and not to just prove anything, competitive wise, but just to see if your body can do it. And at Cocodona, I couldn't keep anything down for those first 100 miles. I consumed probably less than 1,200 calories, but I just kept going, and I felt great because, I just switched out. I'm on that fat adapted train. Once I was able to take in calories, I'm like, here we go, just back to my normal train. And like, the key is just being able to find that sweet spot, I think, between, you're burning some carbs, but you're burning a majority of your fat, and you just kind of keep those topped off, and you will go forever.
Right. And by the way, guys, we haven't talked about Cocodona, but he finished second. So that's just craziness. And I mean, and that was 250 miles, out in the desert. And it's a tough race, because you're the third person that I've interviewed that has ran Cocodona, and you're the only one that I've interviewed that's finished it, and you came in second place. So I talked to Corey Waltering recently, and then I spoke to a local guy here named Jason Thinnell, who ran it as well, and just talked about how really tough that race was. And I don't know what those guys' diets were, because we didn't talk about diets. We were, we didn't hit on that very much. But like listening to your system, it seems to have paid off, because like you talked about, the Hurt 100. I mean, for those who don't know what the Hurt 100 is, it's easily one of the harder 100 milers around. It's in Hawaii, and no, it's not on a beach. You're not running around Honolulu. You're literally running in. I don't know if
The
it's
jungle.
even fair to. I don't even know if it's fair to say this. You're like running through the jungle, right? I mean, it's kind of like a jungle-ish atmosphere. And the routes, guys, the routes to this looks like something you would see in like an Avengers movie, coming out of the ground, trying to like pull you down under the ground. These routes are gnarly as hell, and you went out there and you won it, first off.
Yeah.
Second off, you ran it in under 24 hours, which is amazing. So going into that race, I know, you've said in the past you just wanted to finish it, but it played out differently for you, to where you actually were able to go in there and can't come out with a win. The evolution of how that race got going, did you feel as it progressed that you were going to be able to come out on top?
Not until lap 4. I I knew a couple of guys that were up front, and I was just first time in Hawaii. I wanted it just to be special. I just wanted to finish, and anytime I just go out to finish, I generally, if I'm actually doing that, actually doing what I tell myself, I do quite well. I just hold back, and 100 milers have been a harder thing for me to figure out over the last couple of years, trying to get on that, hit the podium. I've come close, but they're much different than the 200-mile races, which I think are, to me, like that's my go-to. But you have to be a little bit more competitive, push a little bit harder on the hundreds. And I tend, because I'm only doing races generally one time, and I pick stuff that's just ridiculously hard.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows how the day is going to play out. And I really went into that race just like, I'm just going to finish. And I held back at the beginning, middle of the pack, and just kind of just hung out, just tried to figure out the looped course. And yeah, by the time I got to the 4th lap, I was like, okay, I think I might hit podium. And if I play it smart, I might even do better, but I'm just going to keep my head down and just keep trucking forward. And I got my opportunity, and I went for it.
That's exciting, because that's not a race that's just easily won. And you don't, it's just some it's just a really hard race, and some really big people have won that race. And I mean, you're up there with Gary Robbins and stuff like that. And I mean, that's exciting. I mean, especially for a guy who said you just now think you figured it out, and it's pretty cool looking at your results and watching how you've just, how you just have gotten faster and faster and better, and then talking about your diet and whatnot, which leads me into the last part of the interview. You're getting into the coaching game a little bit, right?
Yeah. I've been coaching quietly on the side, a few people, just over the last year, just to see if I like it. I do. I love it. I've watched one of the guys I work with. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and when I first started working with him, he was only running on the treadmill. I mean, just like 6 miles at a time. And I started kind of picking his brain about, like, I was like, hey, you should get into trail running. And he thought it was kind of out of his league for a little bit, I think. And I went out on a few runs and took him out there on the trails, and then he got hooked. I mean, just got the bug and started looking into it. And he's like, oh, I want to do my first, 50K. And then, so I got him to do that. And then it was like a couple months later, he did his first 50-mile race. And it was, it's pretty special to see that, just over the last couple of years, just watch the guy transform. And to me, I truly believe anybody could do this stuff. It does take time and dedication. But I really believe it. And I mean, I'm one of those guys. Again, I was overweight and I don't come from a running background. I played soccer in school, but running was the worst part of it. And to be able to do these things that I'm doing now, it just, like I said, I still have a hard time, accepting the fact that I'm a half decent athlete. And I know that must be crazy to hear, but that's just me. I like bringing myself down to earth and like, okay, how can I improve? But the reason I got into this is to share moments like this with people, and the coaching thing, I think, is going to be something real special for me moving forward. And hopefully, as I get out of the medical game in a few years, it'll be something I can kind of start, making my primary way of making money. But yeah, I've been working with another female athlete too. That's, again, just seeing all these just amazing, improvements in her game, and she's going for her first 50 miler here pretty soon. So I'm not officially open for business right now. I have a website, 8moremilescoaching.com, and you could go on there, learn a little bit about me. I've got some of my blog stuff on there, but hopefully within the next week or two, I'm hoping to have a pricing system set up so I can get this thing going. So my 8 More Miles got trademark approved, and I've in the works to get my LLC. So it's all happening really fast, which is I'm excited about, but it's kind of a little nervous too. I want to do well, and I want to give everyone a great experience. So I probably won't be taking on like a ton of athletes at the beginning and just keeping it small. And again, I'm with all this new software that I'm doing and learning how to do this. I want it to be a great experience, and hopefully some of these people can bear with me in the early stages. But I've got a lot of great friends that are coaches, so they're giving me some good input.
Well, I mean, let's face it. You're not exactly hanging out with like average people. I mean, you hang out with elite people. So like, Jeff Browning and Nick Curry. I mean, these guys are, these guys are at the top. I mean, so I mean, it's cool to be. I'm sure you've been able to pick their brains, and I mean, and realistically, don't cut yourself short here. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff, and you have had a lot of success, and you obviously have got something going on that's working. And I mean, it just makes sense that you can share that success that you had. Somebody else can pick up that success that you have, use the same system that you're using, and to quote, win a championship, which means maybe finishing that first 50 miler, right? Because everybody's championship looks a little different, right? For some people it's winning a race, for some people it's finishing a race, and it just listening to you talk about the food and the nutrition really goes to show how dialed in you are in understanding the nuances of being successful in running.
Yeah, again, finishing is always my first goal. I mean, in the beginning, I would tell anyone going for their first race, like just work on getting across that finish line. That's the number one thing. And then after you've done that in all these different distances and different like types of terrain, and then you can start, you'll ultimately, as you train, you'll get faster, like or better, and then there's only so much you can do, and then you have to start tweaking like every little thing. I mean, that's what all the pro athletes do. They look at the data of what they're doing these testing on treadmills or through their blood work or whatever, and how can I tweak this? How can I do this? And it's just to give you that a little bit of an edge. I live at elevation, for example. I'm 7,000 feet. I train most of my runs. I'm going at 9,000 to 10,000 feet, and then I'll yo-yo. I call it yo-yoing my lungs. I do that constantly. So I'll do that in the morning, and then the next couple hours later, I'll be down at 3,000 feet, and then I might catch a run down there if I have time, and then back up living at 7,000 feet. So you have to kind of just make do with whatever you have, whether it's, the heat or elevation, and just, you can get better wherever you are. You can get better. I mean, there's East Coasters that come over the West Coast and like destroy, and then vice versa. And it's just like the training and the time and dedication that you put in. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all it is, just putting in the time.
Absolutely. And I guess that leads me to my very, the last thing is, I guess you have what Western States coming up. What else do you have after? What else besides Western States? I mean, I say that, but let's face it, Western States is a big flipping deal, right? I guess you're really hoping to go there and show up and show out pretty well, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Not until like I think it was Hurt, like right after Hurt, I'm like, I might do decent at Western. Like I have to train my body a little bit differently because again, I'm doing the crazy mountainous stuff, and there's not quite as much climbing. It's a lot more runnable, and I can like hold a good pace, but it's just different, right? You're running more obviously than instead of hiking or climbing, and then you're just using different types of muscles, and then there's a heat factor in the canyon. But yeah, I'd like to see and do as well as I can there, with finishing in mind, obviously being first and foremost. But I really think I'm excited about doing it again, and just checking that box and then going on to the next thing. I have I'm doing that in June. I'm doing Trans Rockies in August with a buddy of mine, and we're going to be running as a duo on that one, competing. So that's going to be kind of fun because you can only stay you have to stay within a certain amount of distance within each other, and finish each stage together. And so that's going to, you're only going to be as strong as your weakest link, right? So that's going to be, and it's just, to me, that's just something different I've never done before. So I find that exciting. And then Run Rabbit Run in September, which I got an entry to that. So there's a big purse prize on that one. I don't really plan on chasing that, but who knows? We'll see what happens. Nick ran that, and he did pretty well there. So maybe I'll have a good shot as well.
Well, just remember one thing: if you can take anything, the one thing that I've learned is, and I know better than I, because you're a lot more experienced to this than I am, is that it's just like football, where they say any given Sunday, any given day, it can be anybody's day. And I'm sure when Phil lined up at Tunnel Hill that day against Zach Bitter, arguably the fastest 100-miler in the world, right? On, track, on flat surfaces, Zach is the man, right? And against Taggart Van Etten, who right underneath Zach, he's a quick young guy, right? I'm sure when Phil lined up that day, he probably did not expect that he was going to be crossing that finish line before both of them. And listening to him tell that story about how he was like underneath a mile from finishing, and him and his wife are running, and they see Zach and his wife right up in front of him. He was like, he was like, holy shit, and all of a sudden he just hit the gas and just went, right. And, and I mean, and that's huge, right? I mean, and we know that, Zach is world class, like up here. And I mean, but still, Phil had that day. And I mean, it's just like, you never know when you line up to these races. So who knows, man, you can go to Western States and maybe do some special stuff, and go to, Run Rabbit and do the same thing. You just don't know. I mean, and
100 miles is a big distance, a lot can happen.
a lot can happen, and a lot can go right and a lot can go wrong. You just never know. It just depends on the day. So, but I, this has been a great time, Peter. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you forever. It's just like the conversation just never ends. It's just like I can just move on to one thing. But it has been a true pleasure talking to you and listening to, all the great things you've accomplished running, and listening to your nutrition, and just hearing all the great things around all that. It's just really cool, because rarely do you hear somebody talk passionately about nutrition to where they feel like it's a difference maker, because most people just go into the race and just they're not, it's not as big of a deal for them. But that was a really cool thing. So I really appreciate your time and sitting down with me again, and going over your running journey. It's been excellent.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So guys, that is it for this week's episode. I mentioned it in Phil's interview. I am now doing an audio version of this as well, in case you don't want to see my face. Multiple people reached out wanting that audio. I'm on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I'm on all of them, Stitcher. I'm on like everything now. So you can you'll be able to listen to this on there if you don't want to watch the video of us. So that is it for this week. And as always, I will see you on the trail.